are at Lupolo, and I am here with George Mendes. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
So today we're going to be talking about a topic that is obviously near and dear to your heart, Portuguese cuisine.
Yeah.
But we're talking about it in terms of products, because for people to get started cooking, it's often not just like, okay, I'm going to pull out the regular items. And we have in front of us here is a really cool new product, Try the World, where you get a box that says like, all right, this is everything you need to get started.
Right, it's all things Portugal. It's basically your go-to ingredients, like what really represents Portuguese culture, a normal Portuguese pantry, whether it be snacks, condiments, olive oil, basically everything that really represents Portuguese flavors.
Right, and so for people who aren't familiar with Portuguese flavors, what are some of the items that people like desperately need to get started?
You must have a good olive oil. One for finishing, one for cooking. I mean, you don't really have to spend a ton of money on it. It's probably in 99.9% of Portuguese recipes, from savory to sweet, literally. And then after that, it's bacalhau. And this particular product, it's preserved in a can, but in Portugal, we're known to have 365 different recipes for bacalhau
Just
to represent
salted cod, for those
every
who are
year.
not as
Exactly.
cool. And
Dried salted cod that you reconstitute in water. In this way, this is a version that's already preserved in olive oil that you just open up the can, it's ready to eat. So with codfish, definitely on the top 5 list of your Portuguese pantry, by all means.
And what about seasoning and spicing things up? What are some of the items that you have to get those flavors beyond the salted cod flavor?
Sure, I mean, salt of course, but paprika, a sweet smoke version, or whatever your preferences are, a spicier version. There's a pimentón that's more, it's Spanish sweet smoked paprika, but paprika is definitely a go-to seasoning. Bay leaves are very, very important. A lot of times we use a lot of dry bay leaves. At the restaurants here at Lupolo and at Aldea, we use a lot of fresh. I like the more potent, a little bit more stronger leaves from the fresh. And then after that, it's parsley and cilantro. Right. Parsley slightly ahead of cilantro, but parsley is...
It's like winning a little bit if you had to pick one.
Yeah, if you had to pick one, who's in the lead going around the track, it's parsley. We have a great... This is a perfect example of a condiment. Caramelized onions with a balsamic reduction that, at the Portuguese table, you go to anybody's home or you go to a cafe in Lisbon or a bar if you have you, and there's almost always going to be on the table when you sit down a container with olives, some olive oil, some bread, and some kind of a spread, usually sardine, or in this case, it might be onions. Perfect. You literally want to go to a tavern, have a beer, have a glass of wine, and have some bread or some cheese, and just have this condiment and spread it on there. And the caramelized onions is a perfect example of the Portuguese table, or what would use.
And for people who are thinking like, okay, what are the recipes to start with? Like, what are some of the basics that people should start with if they want to start exploring Portuguese cuisine in their own home?
I think the easiest approach and quick thing to cook is shellfish, shrimp, clams, mussels. One of the simplest recipes that we have is actually in my book, My Portugal Recipes and Stories, is a clams bouillon pato. It's named after a poet. And it's basically clams, olive oil, vinho verde, which is a white wine.
I was going to say, you got to have vinho verde in the pantry too.
Right, exactly. Garlic and cilantro. It's those 5 ingredients that you combine them, you put them in a pot. They're open, depending on the clams you use, manila clams, little neck clams, they're open within 5 to 7 minutes. That's a quick, and that's representative of a lot of Portuguese recipes using shellfish.
And then what about sweets? Because I feel like for a lot of people, it's like no cuisine is complete without having a few sweet items
Eggs,
on the menu.
very eggy sweets in Portugal. We here at Lupolo and at Aldea, we make a very traditional egg custard tart. It's a pastel de nata, which is basically a dough, very similar to a puff pastry, that you make the dough, you put it into a mold, and you fill it with a custard base of milk, eggs, and butter, and a little bit of sugar, and you cook it all in the oven, firing hot. It caramelizes on the top a little bit, it burns kind of like creme brulee, and then you have this golden puff pastry on the outside, and you eat it with your hand. So that's probably one of the most popular Portuguese pastries out there, by far, hands down.
What are the things that you really feel like are the essence of Portuguese food?
The essence of Portuguese food,
the biggest question ever.
I know.
What's the essence of the entire cuisine?
There's many answers and many directions you can take with that question. I think Portuguese cuisine is very deeply rooted in culture, celebrations. The recipes, a lot of them are just passed on from ancestors to grandma. I like to almost use the word free-spirited in a way that there's a lot of base recipes, and every region will translate them or interpret them differently. But you know, I always think of Portuguese food being very soulful, very authentic, very historic, very simple. There's a lot of deep rustic flavors. There's a lot of marinades going on. It's very simple. It's very honest.
Well, obviously, if anyone wants to literally try the world, they can get Try the World boxes, which explore a lot of different cuisines every month. And obviously, if you want to learn more about Portuguese cooking, you can also pick up My Portugal, which is really one of my favorite books.
Thank you.
Seriously. Or you can just come into Lupo or Aldea if you really don't want
to. Come into Lupo or Aldea, exactly.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.